So, hello and welcome to today's Expert Diary session. Today's Expert Diary topic is tips for designing the perfect email marketing campaigns. So, it's about email designs that we are going to talk about. And our guest for the day is Paul Airy. Well, Paul has been an email designing expert for the last 10 years, and his forte mainly lies in HTML typography, but his interest level spans from creative strategy, UI, UX designing, email accessibility, to you can say web designing, and so on. And Paul has also written a book titled A Type of Email, a handbook for working with HTML typography in emails. And for his enormous contribution in the world of emails, Paul was also nominated for the 2019 Business Disability Award. So, Paul, is that all, or would you like to go ahead and add a few things to it?
I think you covered it there. Thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Paul. Today we are going to talk about email designs, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about email designs, previously we used to say what are the different aspects of it, but now I think it has become more relevant than ever. People have been talking over the past couple of years about empathy in email. Content should be crisp. The engagement factor should be, it should be at the topmost priority. People shouldn't have to toggle much, and shouldn't have to swipe much for the CTA. So accessibility, engagement, relevance, compassion, all these have suddenly become very important in the world of email marketing. It's not that they were relevant, but they have become very important now. So I would like to hear it from you regarding the importance of email design in the current scenario and how it's going to be in future. So that's my first question to you. What is the importance of email design?
Okay. Well, email design is really important. A lot actually is considered and decided on at that email design stage. The decisions that are made then do have an impact on the development, the deliverability, and ultimately the recipient experience as well, which then impacts the effectiveness of an email. So that design stage is really, really key. And the things to think about in that design stage, and it's the approach that I've always taken, is really thinking about the person who's going to receive that email. So yes, you're right. There's a lot of discussion about the importance of diversity and thinking about people as people. But that's always really been how I've approached email design. Anyway, I've thought about it from a point of view of somebody has taken the time and they've invited me as a brand into their inbox. They've given me that privilege. They've given me their email address. They've trusted me with something of themselves. And so for me, it's a responsibility to actually give them something in return that is really valuable for them. So this is why I'm so passionate about it. That's why design is so important, because I as an email designer, an email developer, I owe it to them to give them the experience that that they deserve, that they've opted into, and so that's that one-to-one connection has always been my approach, and I guess that's what's driven me towards to taking steps forward and wanting to innovate, because it's always asking the question. I'm always asking the question, and what more can I do? How much can I enhance that experience even more? What are the things we haven't thought about yet that can be brought into that initial design process? And it's more than just a visual thing. It's more than just deciding where text and images are going to sit on a screen. It's actually about the whole experience, and I like to kind of phrase it as, you don't design an email, you design an email experience, because it's a very tangible thing, especially in the age of mobile technology. Once upon a time, emails were received on a desktop machine. It was very static, but now people are moving around all the time. Even in lockdown, they're still going out and about with their phones. So it's important to deliver that experience to them in a really considered way. So yeah, so that, it's a really important stage, and one not to be rushed, and one not to be not to be done in a half-hearted way.
So we are again addressing that same question, that when an email is being sent from the sender, is it being sent to a number of people in the list, or is it being sent to each person in that list? There's a big difference between that, because the recipients are always going to think that it's a one-to-one conversation and it's not a one-to-many conversation. And
Absolutely.
every single person will have certain unique attributes and cultural attributes and certain things which will result in every email content being unique. I would like to say that I just wish that all the email marketers would look into email designing in the same way, which I hope they will. Keeping that in mind, we have many a time subscribed to many emails, so we know that different emails come into our inboxes. So my next question is, what is the most exciting thing that's there in your inbox? Like, what are those exciting email designs that you get to see in your inbox currently?
Yeah. Okay. Well, you mentioned about that one-to-one experience, and I think the ones that have come into my inbox that I get excited about are ones that do have that that connection that makes me feel like you're sending me an email that's actually about something that I'm really interested in. So there's a couple, or two or three actually, that I can talk about, that are in that kind of vein. So there's one that I received from the RSPB, which is the Royal Society for the Protection of Birds, and it's one actually that I came across in a recent conference, Inbox Expo. It was being talked about at the conference, and it prompted me to sign up to their emails. But coincidentally, I've been spending a lot of time in lockdown, taking walks in my local woods, where I happen to see lots of bird life, and I hear the bird song, and I catch glimpses of them in the trees, and so this is my actual daily experience, my life, and these emails tell me about the species that I'm seeing in there and in the woods, and so this is something that I'm receiving that has a direct connection with my life and of interest to me. So these emails, apart from being really well designed, which they are, they've got a level of accessibility implemented into them, HTML typography being the main thing. But they I learn about the things that I'm seeing around me, and so I look forward to the next one that comes along, because I learn a little bit more, and it adds to that experience. And when I go out again, I'm looking out for something that I've learned about in that email. So it's not just an email for an email's sake. It's actually adding value, not just to my kind of digital experience, but actually when I'm out and and seeing things. So that's the RSPB email, which is really good. I recommend subscribing to. And then there's a couple of other ones which are very data driven. So there is one that I get from Grammarly. So I write a fair bit with write blogs, and the book he mentioned. So Grammarly is a tool that helps me to write well, and so it checks my spellings and my grammar and those kind of things. And I get an email from them every month that tells me how well I'm doing or where I need to make improvements in my writing. So it tells me how many words that I've written, which sometimes can be quite a lot. So it's interesting to see, and all this information is presented graphically. So it's very illustrative, this email. So it shows me graphs of and how things have increased or decreased, as well as all the numbers. It's very visual. So it tells me how many unique words I've used in a given time. How many different aspects of the writing, really. And also how I've compared with other customers of Grammarly as well. So I can see, how I'm faring against the worldwide users that are out there writing away. And so, yeah, this data-driven thing that's personal to how I'm doing in my writing is really good. And again, it's got levels of accessibility in there too. So that's really good. And then the other one that I can call out is from my energy supplier, Bulb, and they send out an email every I think it's every 6 months they send it out, or maybe 3 months, that tells me how I'm using energy, and it's a green energy company, so they tell me how many trees I've saved because of my energy usage, or how many. It's very much about the planet, so it tells me things that are related to how I've used my energy and how much of an impact I've had on the planet, really. So again, and that's something very interesting, and something that helps me to understand that something as really, you don't really think about your energy. You actually use it, and it kind of makes you think about where what you can how you can use your energy better. And but again, it's very graphical, so the email, the illustrations are all like hand drawn illustrations in there, and it's quite fun. And there's a bit of an animated GIF as well in the top section in the hero image. So it's a really good personal email as well. So those three are kind of a really good set, really, to kind of an example of what is really good. I mean, there are others out there that are using interactivity and those kind of things. But I think when it comes down to it, it's really about how relevant that email is to you and what it's actually saying to you in your life. So yeah.
So the emails that you did talk about, they were data driven, or something that is giving you information. So
yeah,
I presume
that's right.
So I presume the one that you received regarding different kinds of birds, different species of birds, I believe there is some form of audio file or video file that is attached with that email in order to give that immersive experience, I suppose.
Yeah, there are. Yeah, so there's links to some videos, so you can or some audio as well. If it's the bird song, for example, there's a link so you can hear the sound. So it brings the whole thing to life, really.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, there was one of their emails that they did where it literally was about identify the bird by the bird's song. So
yes.
it showed you what the species was, and then you could play the sound again. So when you're out and about, you go, oh yeah, I know what that is now.
And it actually works in two levels, I believe, because one, you get to understand how much you have come to know the birds, number one, and number two, you, even if you cannot go out, maybe because of some regulations or something, when you go to that email and you listen to that audio clip, you feel like you are close to nature at the same point.
That's a good place to be.
Exactly, true, very true. And so keeping this in mind, we are talking about audio files, graphical representations, and all these things, images. My next question is very specific to the different areas of an email. For example, the header, the footer, above the fold, CTA, hero image, all these things. I would like to ask you, what should be the approach of an email marketer with regards to the different areas of an email?
Sure. Okay. So the first thing to think about is the objective of the email and what the actual message is, and if there's a call to action. Sometimes there isn't a call to action. Sometimes it's purely informational and there's no response. But it's really important to think about those things so that you can ensure that the elements that go in the email are fully considered and thought through. So I actually start looking at the elements of an email right from the subject line. Subject line is the entry point of the email, and it's really important. That's why there's so much emphasis on subject line testing, so that see if email can get opened in the first place, and also AI subject line writing now, which is something that Fraser do. So so the subject line is the entry point. It's the start of that email message, and really everything else should flow on from there. So that subject line must be connected to what the content is. So there's a subject line, and then is the first point in that journey, if you like, and I think about this as a journey through the email. So the subject line is a starting point of that. Then you've got the pre-header as well. So that the pre-header is it follows on from the subject line. So this is thinking about the messaging and what's the conversation that you're having, what you're saying to the recipient. So again, this plays back to what I said at the beginning about designing for that person. So what does that, how are these connected? Because in one sense, you've got subject line, which is a thing, and then you've got a pre-header, which is another thing. Then you've got the content, which is another thing. But really, you need to join them together, so they actually are, they're all connected. So you've got your subject line, you've got pre-header, which follows on from the subject line, and it's a really good opportunity for a marketer to actually add value to the subject line itself. So the subject line might say something that prompts a response and an invitation into the email. The pre-header will then add further information and add value to that subject line to invite the recipient in. And then you're into the content of the email. So you've opened up the email now, and then you're seeing a headline. If you've got a headline, some emails don't have headlines, but then it's going through the sequence. And so you've got headline, and then you might have hero image or something like that, and then you've got your subheadings, and then your content, so your paragraphs and other kind of textual elements, and your call to action. And these are connected. So I often think as well of the call to action has a direct relationship with the subject line, because the subject line is inviting you in to do a thing. The call to action is invited to do that thing, whatever it is. So it's thinking in those terms how there's a thread that runs through each of them. And this is why I said it's important to think about the objective of the message, because that's kind of helps you to decide whether those things are relating to each other and actually are joined up, or whether they're being treated as individual things. So a typical example of a call to action might be find out more. Might be something that people use, but actually, is it better to think about what you actually want to do in relation to the message itself, and the subject, going right back to the subject line? So it's from a content point of view, that's how I would encourage people to actually go through that journey. So that's from a content point of view alone. So then you've got the visual thing. So the visual side of it is about effectively making the same considerations, but presenting them in a visual way. So so you've got now you're using type, your text. You're using headings, so you've got hierarchy in the design. So you've got headings that are distinctly larger than the main body of the text. You've got a headline that is even bigger than that. You've got space around, and I think space is really important, and especially given the number of devices that people use, and space can change. So it's thinking about how that space is going to change from one device to another as well. So this is when we get into the experience stuff and thinking about, okay, so how does that work when you're looking at multiple devices? And then the call to action. So the call to action, again, making that really clear. And then you get to the end of that process, and then it's actually then thinking about the landing page, if there is one from that email as well. So it's like a journey. That's kind of how I approach it, and it's kind of a good test to see, is that journey in any way, is it has it been in some way halted because of the design or because of the text, or is it a free flowing way through an email? Is it too cluttered, or is it clear enough for the recipient to understand what you're saying and what you want them to do? So it's, as long as that message is clear and what you want them to do is clear, I think the elements should serve that purpose. So that's how I'd approach it, and that's how I do approach it.
Okay. Actually, there are a few things that I always had in my mind. Like, since designing an email, there are many elements to it. And making a mistake regarding one element can also, cause my email to be scrutinized by the ISPs, the recipient ISPs. So I just wanted to ask a few short questions. So what do you think is the best font that one should go with in terms of writing an email? It may be a web safe font, it may be a purchased font, but which kind of font do you think works well?
Yeah, I mean, you've got your web safe fonts. Arial obviously is. I wouldn't say there was a best font. It's in the sense of for deliverability, but it's more about something that's really come to the fore in recent times. Actually, is about fonts that allow your email to stand out in the inbox, and web fonts are a really good example of that, and we've seen an increase of use of web fonts, especially over the last couple of years, because they really help you to stand out. So you can go for web safe fonts, and they're fine. But if you want your brand to really stand out, then you can use different types of web fonts as well. So you've got your free ones like Google fonts. You can license a font, so that gives you a little bit more of exclusivity and less likely to be used by other brands. And some brands even have bespoke web fonts commissioned as well, so they actually are unique. So few examples of that. So the BBC have their own font they actually design themselves with some consultants, and there's an electrics brand, AO, appliances online, that they had their own web font design for them as well. There are others, but I suppose in the sense of what we were talking about earlier, again, that's when you see their font and it's really clearly them, it's their brand. It helps. There's an immediate connection. In fact, it's almost like you don't even need to see a logo on the email, because you know it's from them because of the typography, because of how they've, the font they've chosen. I think from a deliverability point of view, I think it's important to use HTML typography. As if you've read my book, then you'll realise that that's something I would say. But yeah, and to not use not embed text in images, if at all possible. There are cases when you might want to do that, but there's ways of doing it right as well. So yeah, to use HTML text for text, and images for illustrations and photographs, really.
Okay. And one more thing that I always wanted to ask is, I've read a few articles which say that putting up CTA buttons above the fold or before the reader actually scrolls down is a better option. And some people usually put the CTA at the bottom because they want the readers to go through the entire email content, get the message, and then click on the CTA. What is your personal preference, CTA at the top or CTA at the bottom?
It's the ultimate question, isn't it? I think, yeah, I mean, this is where A/B testing comes into it, really. I think because the fold it comes from the days of print and newspapers, really, and so yeah, it totally made sense in a world where you've got fixed kind of design. You effectively got a sheet of paper, and the fold is where that sheet of paper gets folded, and you want the content above that fold, so that's where the phrase comes from. The folding on digital media and email can appear anywhere, because a device may show that button, it may not. If somebody's looking at their emails on their phone in landscape, that button might not even appear there. Or if so I think I don't think there's a thing where you could say it's best to be in this position. I think it's more about test and learn and try different positions of where those might be. There are also legal in financial services as well, situations where it's actually illegal to have a button higher up, because you have to present all the information about a financial product first before you enable somebody to then go and either find out more about that product or purchase it. So there are legal things in some cases where you have to have it lower down. But yeah, I mean, I would say test and learn, try it and see with the same content, and put the call to action in different places. Another thing to try on that is actually links versus buttons, because links, obviously the visibility is a lot less, and if you're putting your call to action in a text link versus a button, you might find that there are differences in response, purely because it's visually stronger and easier to select it as well. So yeah, so it's the kind of the ultimate question, but really testing it out is a way to find out.
Okay, since you talked about links, what is the safe number? How many links should one include in an email content?
With the links, I tend to use links fairly sparingly, really, and it comes back to the question about the objective. It's about the appropriateness of those links. So asking yourself, is adding a link into an email, is it adding value to that journey, that message, or is it distracting? Is it going to pull somebody away from what you actually want them to do? it's more about that rather than the safety. It's really about, is it going to take somebody away from that? And you can analyze that, because when you do your, when you look at the metrics after an email's been sent out, and you can see what people have selected on, what links they've gone to, selected, and maybe left the email. So you'll be able to see kind of if those links are becoming a distraction or not. But yeah, I would use them sparingly. I think, and I would tend to go for a button would be the call to action. The links would be, text links would be more about almost like further information, related subjects, but not necessarily the main focus of the email itself that's being looked at.
So it's like one, maybe maximum two links, maybe, or one link is enough, something like that.
Yeah, and I think even with call to actions, it's being careful about that as well. In an ideal world, I think, one message, one call to action, because it's clear. It's like you've invited somebody into an email, you want them to do one thing, and you're more likely to get, well, potentially more likely to get a response if there's no confusion. People, all right, I've got one thing I need to do in response to this email. I know exactly where to do it, and I'm not being presented with lots of different options to kind of decide which one is what I should do. So yeah, and if you are using more than one call to action for and sometimes there are good reasons, then use what I call a secondary call to action. So it might be you might have a really strong button, for example, it's like a solid color, and then you might have a secondary button which is like a button that's maybe white with an outline on it, so it's not as visually pronounced.
Appealing
It's
and attracting. Visually not that attractive like the first button.
Yeah, so you can. It's still clearly a button, but it's the emphasis visually is on the stronger one. So yeah, so that's one approach to take, and you see that you see that fairly often, that approach. So but yeah, it helps you visually anyway to see what's been asked of you really as a recipient.
As you were talking about one email having one CTA button, it's to create least confusion and more clarity so that more engagement can be fetched. But very often we see that people usually either end up doing more or doing less with regards to email designs. When it's less, then very often it becomes very irrelevant, or recipients don't find it to be very catchy. And when it is more, like different colors and images and all those things, it unnecessarily attracts the attention of the ISPs. So to strike a balance between the less and the more, it might not be a different thing, but then there are some measures that can be taken. But these are the pitfalls, doing more or doing less. So what do you think are those common pitfalls that email marketers very often face or experience, and how do you think these can be avoided?
Okay, so yeah, I think in terms of the experience of the recipient, I think a good kind of way of looking at it is in terms of devices, is thinking about what's on the screen. So in terms of and as somebody scrolls through it, or either on a desktop or a laptop or a mobile, it's looking at the design from that point of view. Excuse me. And this is kind of one of the common pitfalls that does happen, is that emails are often tended or do get designed for one type of device. So I see fairly often designs visualized like it. So I see like a PDF or something like that, where it shows one view of an email, and actually there's There's a lot more to there's a lot more variety in terms of how people are going to see that email. So having almost like a 4-dimensional view of how that email is going to be presented, thinking about what that same email is going to look like on multiple devices at the same time, will really help to kind of strike that balance really, so that when you think, let's just take one example. Let's think about the headline as just an example of an email. It might be that headline, how it's been visualized for one device. So let's say desktop for argument's sake. It may be very big on the desktop view, and what will happen on the mobile view, or what could happen if it's not developed right, which again comes back to the beginning about thinking about development at the design stage, is that heading might fill the screen on a mobile device, and then it doesn't look great, and it's not really inviting to the recipient that don't really want to do anything more with it. So it's thinking about how the email is going to be received in that sense. How is it going to look boring, for want of a better word? Is it going to look disengaging? And the visual elements will really help you to kind of across the devices at the same time you're thinking about that, will help you kind of strike that balance. In terms of the ISPs and then deliverability, again, that comes back to using HTML text and getting that good image to text ratio balance that used to be really important a number of years ago, is less important, but it's still it's in terms of deliverability anyway, but it's still important as a practice. So yeah, it's certainly that idea of thinking about multiple devices at the same time, and this is what I tend to do, is let's think about, okay, the email is going to look like this, the experience is going to be this, but if it's presented that way here, then on another device it's not going to be as great. And it's obviously you can't do that for every device, there's so many of them, but you can get an understanding of how engaging or not that email is going to be across them. So yeah, so that's a common pitfall. Another one is talking about the visual experience, is designing for the visual experience only. So as you'll probably be aware, that accessibility is something that I talk about a lot, and it's thinking about the audio experience as well. So as much about as it is about the design of the visual elements, it's also about the design of the audio elements in it as well. So describing images with alternative text in the alt attributes, and thinking about how an email is going to sound as much as how it's seen.
Okay, and keeping that in mind, so as you said that you also write articles, so I would like to ask you now that what are some of the best articles that you have come across which are related to email designs, which are very informative?
Okay, so I think one of the great resources to go to is, if you're not already getting involved with the email Slack channel, email Geeks Slack channel, because you'll find out about lots of different resources from all over the email community right there. So yeah, there's always things being posted there that's there's going to be something that's of interest. Even yesterday was something new that came about. So that's a really good place to find out what's really current as well. Really Good Emails has always been a favorite of mine. Their website, where they they showcase what they consider to be really good email design, and they show not just the email itself, but they show the code behind it. So if you're a developer, you can see how things have been created from a development point of view. And they also kind of look at it as well, give it a little bit of almost a summary to describe what it is and what it's about. So that's a really good resource for email. But I also look beyond email as well, because we can get quite in our own little kind of sphere in the email world. So it's kind of good to get out of that as well, especially with design, because design is bigger than email. There's lots of design going on in the world. So one of my kind of go-to places is I actually sign up for the Design Week email, and there's articles in there about car design, for example. There's often type design and typography, so that's clearly an interest. Design about other things that are not to do with graphical or digital at all. It's actually something that's to do with buildings or architecture or all those kind of things that can then inspire to think, oh, that's a really interesting idea, even if it's the idea about something. So it might be there was one article in there about Lego doing Braille Lego. So so it's those kind of off the wall things that you can come across as ideas that can help spark ideas about email and what can we do about accessibility, in that case to do with email, and it might be things to do with color or how tangible things are, and so looking beyond email is really good as well. So there are a couple of things that I do.
And that brings me to the last question of the day. Since we are talking about email designs for so long, I think we all know and realize that email designing is an art. And when we talk about art, we say that people take inspiration from the nature or from daily life when they are going to recreate a form of art. So when someone has to create a good email with the perfect email designs, where do you suggest the email designers or the email marketers to look for in terms of inspiration before creating the perfect email?
I mean, I think for me, the go-to places for that are Litmus has always been a favorite. I've been kind of been involved with Litmus for quite a while, and so they're always producing new articles, writing new articles, blog posts and videos and those kind of things that really help to fine tune the art, really. So Litmus are really good, and also Email and Acid as well. So they write some great articles on specific things. So dark mode is an example of that. So there's been a lot kind of how to get to grips with dark mode and what does it involve, and how best to approach it, those kind of things. And so so those places. Action Rocket as well, an agency in London who create emails. They have a blog post, and they also do an email weekly as well. So and they again writing similar things, and it's quite good actually to almost to read about the same thing from a different perspective, and because it's typically it won't be a repeat from one to the other. You'll get a slightly different kind of approach or view on how to do it, how to fine tune the art. So it's good to kind of to read a different, a few different things to see a different approach. and also with time as well. So what you find is as time goes on, emails changing all the time, and support for different things it's changing all the time. So it's good to kind of almost read the more recent things as well if you can. It's not always it's not always possible, but sometimes things will have happened more recently that are covered in those articles. So yeah. So yeah, they're the ones that I go to. Yeah.
So do you think that checking once, like if an email marketer has to send an email, so checking the inbox, checking the personal inbox and finding out some emails to which that particular email marketer has subscribed to, do you think even looking into those emails can also provide some inspiration or some ideas for the email marketer to go ahead and
Yeah,
design?
yeah, absolutely. I think and the as a recipient of emails, you're almost the best judge of whether they're whether they're successful or not, because they're being sent to you. You're the recipient. You might be a customer of that brand, or you might just simply be interested to see what they're sending out. But yeah, but then you can then experience that email as you would, and on your device, and it's kind of real. So yeah, sign up to lots of emails, because you'll find out, you'll come across some things that might surprise you as well that's not been written about.
True.
And then you can write about them.
Yes, actually, from my personal experiences, I would say that I wrote an article on email designs, and while researching about it, I had to find out that what are the cultural significance of each color, what is the psychological significance of each color, and all those. So then I realized that I should check the inbox and find out if they are relevant to my requirements, if they resonate with my tastes and preferences or not.
Yeah.
So I thought that checking my inbox would also give me some ideas regarding email designs as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first place to go. Actually, sign up to lots of emails.
Okay, then we have come to the end of this session, and it was a wonderful session of knowledge sharing. It was like your inputs regarding email designs and your experience, and whatever you have said, they are definitely going to help the viewers regarding their email designs when they are going to design emails. So I would like to thank you for being a part of this session. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.